SVC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Latino America, bringing together the leadership teams and product specialists from retail and online operators in Latin American markets.
Discover the potential of Latin America's booming iGaming and sports betting markets at SBC Summit Latin America, the premier industry event in the region. Join SBC at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami from October 31st to November the 2nd. Register now at sbcevents.com.
Last week, key stakeholders in British horse racing agreed on comprehensive changes for the heritage sport to adopt in 2024. Led by the British Horseracing Authority, the BHA, next year, British Horse Racecourses will embrace a new fixture list promoting Premier Racedays to grow and engage racing with a wider audience. Declaring further sweeping changes, the Jockey Club announced that the Grand National will implement its commitment to rider and racehorse safety, in which Britain's biggest race will be reduced to a field size from 40 to 34 runners. Changes are deemed necessary for British racing to recapture its public trust and appeal. Yet, writing to the government, racing leadership maintained their critical concern on the financial impact of affordability checks on UK gambling, impacting racing's future prospects and sustainability for its vast network of stakeholders. And this will be the topic of today's episode of iGaming Daily, and a great way to kickstart the week. And I am joined once again by the two Teds, who I've now got a patent pending for that name, copyright going. But for the audience's sake, we've got Ted Clay and Edward Memway. That's how we'll distinguish you, Ted and Edward. So, Ted Clay, you okay?
Yeah, I'm very good, thanks, James. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Like I said, it's Monday, so we're surviving the week already. But did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. Saw some live music, had a few drinks, ate some decent food, not bad overall.
What live music did you see?
I went to Live at Leeds, so it's just like kind of like a mini sort of festival they have in Leeds around various venues throughout the city.
Is it like grassroots bands or?
No, some of the, they're not like, massive like festival headlining sort of names, but some more established ones.
Who's the biggest name?
The biggest one, probably... it's hard to say really because there's a couple. Probably like Shame maybe because they were at Glastonbury this year. So
Shame?
Shame, yeah, like sort of punk band from London, I think they are.
Oh, it's a shame that I don't know them, to be honest. I thought they would be bigger than that, I'm not going to lie. Okay, well, The Shame, there you go. There's a listening recommendation from Ted Clay. Edward, how are you doing? How was your weekend? Was it full of shame?
No, nowhere near as exciting as Ted OC's, but just watched a lot of TV, and it was a bearable weekend. Yeah.
Go on, what did you watch?
I watched the rugby, and then I was on YouTube watching the Misfits boxing, high caliber sporting event.
Yeah, we've had a full in-depth discussion about this in the office, and let's just say my point of view is...
Well, I am the target audience. So, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that a lot of the social media uproar that KSI should have won the fight is wrong. I don't think he did anything boxing worthy to win that fight. In fact, he didn't even throw a jab, which just shows how much it wasn't a boxing fight. It was a hugging competition. And actually, an interesting fact that I read on social media, so it might not actually be a fact. It might just be one of those social media things. Throughout the whole fight, KSI engaged in 78 hugs in 6 rounds. That, I think, on average is 13 hugs per round, and that's a world record apparently. It's a Guinness World Book of Records for 13 hugs in a round of boxing each round. There's an insight to what I did at the weekend, is watch a hugging competition. But we'll talk about horse racing, and it's a fascinating one because certainly with the UKGC, the white paper and everything else, I think horse racing was it was untouched, really. I don't think there was that many changes that we expected to come to horse racing from these white paper consultations. But I think just for clarity, and Ted, I'm going to come to you first. Can you just give us give the listener kind of a rundown of what challenges racing's faced over the past few years?
Sure, no problem. I think really there's two key challenges from my perspective, and they're both incredibly intertwined. And the first one is kind of engagement and audience, and the second one is obviously just the sports finances as a whole. One thing, just the elephant in the room to probably get out of the way, because we've talked about this a million times before for obvious reasons, is the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, that shut the sport down for a while. Couldn't get attendees, couldn't have any fixtures on. As a result, no one was betting on it for a bit, which then obviously affected it because a lot of their finances come from the betting levy, where bookmakers pay a certain percentage of their revenues to help support horse racing just because of how intrinsically linked the two sectors are. The other issue, though, is that, and this predates COVID, is that horse racing has kind of been falling down the ladder of engagement in a way. I think in 2018, football overtook it as the most popular betting sport in the UK.
Only in 2018?
I think so, yeah, from what I understand. According to, there was the BG, the Betting and Gaming Council actually had a statement recently when they were talking about the industry support for horse racing. They said that in there. Might be worth double checking, but I'm pretty sure, 2018. And I mean, just based on my own experience of having worked in bookmakers back in there, I just remember Saturday, obviously you just got flooded with people coming in placing football bets, which probably in the grand scheme of things, in some shops amounted to, more money than was put on horse racing throughout the rest of the week. So it's struggled in that regard. Attendances have been down as well. So, they've really just been struggling to maintain the same audience that it used to have in its heyday, particularly when it was just sort of the big sport that was associated with betting. And as a result, they've obviously been losing out financially because of that. But they have been trying to find sort of new ways of engaging with audiences and to try and bring new people in, which I'd imagine we'll discuss at a different point in this podcast. Yeah,
so I think just to give my perspective on things, like I'm not an avid horse racing fan. I place a bet on the Grand National like everyone else does, or the Gold Cup. There's 2 times in the year that I place a bet, but kind of from the outside looking in, horse racing's kind of taken certainly the British scene. They, I feel like it's got the hooliganism that kind of boxing fans now have. Every time I read the news about the big Grand National race or the Gold Cup, it's always associated with like fighting. I don't know if this is obviously not to do with betting, but we're looking at like horse racing being spread to a wider audience. But the lack of appeal to horse racing for me is the kind of the audience that it's currently got, which is that kind of young, get drunk, have a fight, have a bet kind of culture, which it might impact kind of spreading the awareness of horse racing. But Edward, I'm going to come to you on this next one. Ted's just given an overview of the challenges that horse racing's faced. Can you just give us a rundown of what the sport's been doing to address these issues, and what is the significance of the recent Grand National changes? Because I mean, the last Grand National, how many horses actually died in the big race? I think there's a few deaths, wasn't there? And there was a lot of falls.
Yes. Okay, so focusing on the Grand National, the main call has been that there's going to be a field size reduction from 2024, and the starting number of runners will decrease from 40 to 34. Other major changes, and there's a high emphasis on safety, is the relocation of the first fence, which is going to be brought in 60 yards closer to the starting point. They're doing this to kind of reduce the speed and make sure that the jockeys can clear the first hurdle, which is always considered the most difficult of the race. And they're doing kind of on-course changes, so the start it will revert back to a controlled standing start, and they're moving the starting schedule to a 5 p.m. start to before a 5 p.m. start. This is to ensure a softer ground for the horses to race on. And across the course, they're modifying the course. So I think a couple of hurdles are going to be reduced by 2 inches or so. And there's also going to be a greater emphasis on which horses can qualify. So there's going to be a review of the horse's performance, how they've done over jumps. And the overall commitment there is pretty much a review of, they've been saying this for a number of years, on welfare or especially on the studs, on the safety of the studs, and they want to kind of avoid those situations where horses get injured. And overall, I think it's the correct move, and it's been endorsed by the BHA.
Ted, do you want to add anything to this removal?
Yeah. I agree with Ted. I think it's very important to address some of this stuff because there's been a lot of negative publicity, especially around the Grand National in recent years, because of for the reasons Ted said and for what you said, James, that there's been a lot of safety concerns related to that. There's obviously the big one is animal rights concerns, and we saw that very visibly the last Grand National. There were a lot of protesters on there. Obviously, quite a few people who were involved in the racing.
Those protesters actually hindered the horse's welfare.
That was what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of quite big prominent racing figures came out after that and said that because what the ladders the protesters were using and all that actually contributed to some of the falls. But even without that going on, in some previous Grand Nationals there's been falls that it's happened at Cheltenham as well, hasn't it? So that hasn't really it hasn't helped develop a very positive image for horse racing in some respects. So it's probably quite a good thing that they're addressing it from this perspective, and that will hopefully for them help sort of boost engagement with different audiences. I'd say that we have just seen, though, even before these changes were brought in just last week, we've seen over the past couple of years a few different attempts at finding new ways to reach new audiences, like with the creation of the Racing League, where they tried to kind of tap into that, almost kind of like the football club mentality of having a league with different regional teams. But that I don't really know how well that did in terms of boosting audiences and things like that. I think a few people there's a bit of a consensus that it fell a bit flat. So there's still some work to be done, I think, for them to find new ways of sort of innovative ways of boosting the sport's appeal.
I'd never even heard of this creation club thing at all. So maybe there is more work to be done because it's not reached me. But, I mentioned in the intro that this had been led by the British Horseracing Authority, the BHA. And, racing is closely linked to betting. So, Edward, what is the industry's role in these new rule changes? Do they have any say in it?
Okay, well, horse racing and betting have got kind of a symbiotic relationship. And if you see, look, the BHA have raised an extra 3.5 million from the horse betting levy to fund their new fixtures list, which will prioritise race days, Premier Racedays, which they want to focus on bringing top quality riders, improving the prize money, and improving the coverage of these races across the year. So it's 150 Premier Racedays. It's about 12 to 15% of the overall racing schedule for the UK, but they're going to repackage them, introduce new kind of measures or new ideas to increase the audience participation, the appeal, and how Premier Racedays gets promoted to the wider public. It's a big initiative for the BHA. Again, betting has to kind of rebalance its relationship. No, racing needs to rebalance its relationship with betting, what it wants from it, but also kind of move away at the same time. It needs to become more of an independent sport and rely on TV coverage and other types of sponsors beyond bookmakers, which we've actually seen in the bigger races. But it's, again, one of the things about UK racing is that you've got the showcase races, your Grand Nationals, your Cheltenhams, your Royal Ascots, right? But then they all feed into a bigger system or a bigger network of races, which is your day-to-day race, your day-to-day fixtures. And I think this kind of rethinking or reforming of the schedule has been a long time coming.
And Ted, you've mentioned already in this podcast, and it's been mentioned quite a few times regarding horse racing, is affordability checks. But I kind of want to know, because affordability checks for horse racing, I've already mentioned my knowledge of horse racing isn't as good as yourself, because I think you're pretty well off with horse racing. Can you just clarify why there's so much concern amongst kind of racing stakeholders over the adoption of affordability checks?
Yeah, sure. It's funny, you just made me laugh there because you reminded me of a joke you made in the office once ages ago that you just assumed I'd know a lot about horse racing because I've got a double-barreled name. But yeah, so affordability checks. This all relates to, as we mentioned already on the podcast, how much horse racing relies heavily on betting revenue to support it financially. Obviously, this comes through the levy, which is distributed by the Horse Racing Betting Levy Board. The main thing they were concerned about is the impact that affordability checks could have on operators' own finances, and then in turn, what this could then, how this would affect them through the levy, as well as Ted mentioned, through betting sponsorships, betting media rights payments as well. I think the main thing they were concerned about, and this is something that was obviously voiced a lot by operators over the past couple of years as well, was that affordability checks would drive a lot of customers away by being too overly intrusive. They're also quite concerned about the prospect of affordability checks taking place on racecourses as well, as interfering with, the race day experience of people trying to place a bet and getting told, like, actually, no, we're going to have to check your finances or something like that to make sure you can place this bet. So that's really where the main concern was there. And yeah, last week, 8 different representatives from 8 of the main sort of stakeholding bodies and organisations in the UK, so the Arena Racecourse Company, the Jockey Club, as well as like trainers, stewards and jockeys themselves involved as well, have reiterated these concerns. And I think it's shown that despite what the white paper set out on affordability checks, or as it's called in the white paper, finance risk checks, these racing stakeholders still need a lot of reassurance from government that this is going to work in everyone's favour, basically.
So, Edward, final question for you, and just to round the podcast up, what does the future hold for racing? And can the sport turn around, or is it stuck in this terminal decline?
Look, I'd like to start off by kind of reiterating what Ted O.C. said. I think when you're analysing racing, you have to understand just how vast the network of stakeholders is for the sport. We're not just talking about the racecourses or the jockeys. You're talking about animal welfare, its contribution to UK agriculture, the breeders, and even stable workers. And actually, I think the BHA, when it thinks about its sports, or when it has to action something for its sports, it has to take care of everyone in that value chain, and it's incredibly difficult. So this is why horse racing is so political as a sport. I don't think you can compare it to any other. I don't think any other sport faces these types of challenges as racing. Now, when they talk about kind of a terminal decline, I think this is a problem not just facing horse racing, but it's facing so many sports post-COVID. You're dealing with your modern audience, which is fragmented, which doesn't necessarily engage with the sport on a traditional format as they used to, and I think that's very hard. That's been very hard for racing, but it's been very hard for motorsports, golf, as we've seen with the Saudi League. And I think that racing is facing kind of generational questions alongside a lot of other kind of sporting bodies of how does it cope, or how does it adjust to the next 10 years, and what are the demands on the sports. I think it can come back, but I think racing needs to think bigger. Again, what the BHA are trying to address is this issue of, for the public, the majority of them will just think of racing as your Grand Nationals, your Cheltenhams, and not be aware of the full schedule. And I think for them, it's right to kind of promote the race courses at their level and say, create kind of local communities, drive local engagement, see if that works. It'll be an interesting project to follow for the next 2 years. And I also think that they've got to understand what are kind of the small wins for them that can get them to a better place.
Perfect. I did say, Edward, you can round off the podcast, but actually, Ted, anything you want to add to that to round us off?
I think Ted made a very good point there that this is obviously not a challenge just facing horse racing. Lots of other sports are having problems with engagement and finance, especially post-COVID. I think another example I'd point to would maybe be rugby league as well, as a bit more of a northern-centric one. Quite well publicised how some of the difficulties faced by that sport. But yeah, I think with regards to whether racing's in sort of a terminal decline, I don't think obviously the sport itself is never going to disappear, but it wouldn't shock me at all if over the next 10 years or so we do see a bit of a downsizing of it. Because obviously there's a lot of, as we've just spoken about, there's a lot of highly complex challenges faced by the sport, but work is being done to turn it around, like with the new proposals the BHA have come out with, and also some betting companies, what they're doing as well. If you look at some of the stuff the UK Tote Group and some of the other World Pool organisations have been doing on sort of sharing information around products and engagement. Steps are being taken, but it's difficult to see where it's going to go as of yet.
Mm-hmm. And we will see where it's going to go, because Ted Omclay and Edward Memway will keep us all updated on SBC News when those decisions are made. So keep your eyes out for that. And anything related to this discussion, any articles from SBC News, I'll leave a link in the description below. But apart from that, great way to start the week, actually. Edward and Ted, thank you. And just to our listeners out there, again, thank you for joining us to start your week off well. And we'll see you tomorrow, and I'll be here tomorrow for Tuesday's episode of iGaming Daily. But until then, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Latino America, being held at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami on the 31st of October to the 2nd of November. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network. Happy reading.